Hi guys, it's Justine, but you can call me Blondie, and for today's video I'm going to be showing you how to make my grandma's sugar cookie recipe. These are my favorite types of cookies to make for the holidays. If you hear clicking in the background, it's because my husband's playing World of Warcraft. But anyways, I actually won an award in high school for the sugar cookie recipe. I entered it in the New Mexico State Fair, and I won I won first place in the sugar cookie category. So I'm gonna show you guys how to make these cookies today, and I'm just gonna get started by showing you all of the ingredients. So first off, what you're going to need for both the cookies and the frosting, you're going to need regular sugar, flour, powdered sugar, rolling pin, measuring spoons, measuring cups, and then you're going to need milk, baking powder, almond extract, vanilla extract, salt, Crisco, and then also food coloring and sprinkles are optional. You'll also need some cookie cutters, of course, and then here are the recipe cards that my grandma made for me for this recipe. I'm actually going to be halving the recipe today because this makes quite a bit of cookies and we don't need that many. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Also, I'm using a KitchenAid mixer, but you do not need to have a KitchenAid mixer. You can use a hand mixer. You can mix it by hand. It's a lot harder to mix it by hand, but if you don't have a KitchenAid mixer, it's totally fine. This just makes it a whole lot easier because cookie dough is kind of hard to mix. So the first thing you're going to need is sugar, and like I said earlier, I'm halving this recipe, so I'm using 3/4 a cup of sugar. So I used a 1/2 cup measurement and a 1/4 cup measurement. And then next I'm putting in 1/2 cup of milk and 1/4 of a cup of Crisco. Now Crisco is kind of a pain in the butt to get out, so just make sure you have a rubber spatula ready because you're gonna need it to get the Crisco out of the measuring cup. Next we have baking powder, and we're going to put in 2 teaspoons of baking powder, but I accidentally only filmed putting 1 of the teaspoons in the mixture, but you're going to need 2 when you're halving the recipe. Next is salt, and you only need 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and then you're going to need 1 egg, which I actually accidentally didn't bring the eggs out at the beginning of the video, but you will need 1 egg for this recipe. Next, you're going to need vanilla extract and 1/2 of a tablespoon. And then comes the flour, and you're going to need 2 1/4 a cup of flour. For the actual cookie mix, you're going to need more flour later on though. And then that's it for the actual cookies. There's not a ton of ingredients, so then you just mix everything up together. If you're using an electric mixer like I am, you can beat it on one of the slower settings. I have mine on like the 1st or 2nd setting usually, and you beat it for at least 5 minutes. You basically just want everything mixed together. A lot of cookie dough recipes, you also need to separate your wet and your dry ingredients. For this recipe, you can just throw everything into the mixer and beat it until it's all mixed together. And the next thing we're gonna do is actually roll the cookie dough. So you're going to need a lot of flour for this step because this cookie dough is extremely sticky. So we're going to put a lot of flour on our countertop. And then I'm making a little mound of flour off at the side because we're going to need that later. And then before I start, I'm preheating the oven to 350 degrees. And then, like I said, this flour is super sticky. So I'm actually going to take some of the flour that I put off to the side, and I'm going to kind of knead it into the cookie dough, kind of like you would for bread dough, just to help it not be as sticky. And you're gonna do that until you can touch it without dough sticking to your hands. And then finally, we're going to roll the dough, and you want the dough to be pretty thick. These are like very cakey cookies. And then once you have it, I don't even know how thick that is, like maybe 1/4 of a centimeter thick, then you can start cutting your cookies with cookie cutters. And then I'm also using a knife, a butter knife, to just get the cookies up so I don't mess up the shapes. The best thing is when you cut a cookie and it actually sticks in the cookie cutter like this, and then you can just put it right on to your pan. And I'm using a dark non-stick pan. If you're using a lighter pan, you're gonna need to spray it with like cooking spray before you put the cookies on. And then you just pop them in the oven for only 10 minutes or until they are like a very light golden brown. They are meant to have like a bit of a cakey texture to them, and so you don't want them to be too golden, just like a very light brown, which I'll show you once they're cooked. And then while all the cookies are baking, we're gonna go ahead and make the frosting. So first thing, I'm gonna take powdered sugar. For a full recipe, you need 1 pound of powdered sugar, but like I said, I'm doing half a recipe, and this is a 2-pound bag, so I'm just kind of estimating, and I'm using about 1/4 of the bag to get about half a pound of powdered sugar. And then next, we are putting in 1/8 a cup of milk, followed by 1/4 a cup of crisco. And then we're going to use 1/16 of a teaspoon of flavoring. I like to use almond extract because that's how my grandma always made them, but you could use vanilla extract or peppermint extract or any sort of flavoring you like. And then once again, you're just going to mix all of those ingredients up together until they're all combined and you get like a whipped-like texture. And then this frosting dries super quickly, and so it's the type of frosting that you don't want to put on your cookies until right before you're going to eat them. So we're gonna put them in Tupperware containers and dye them with food dye until we're ready to eat the cookies. I decided to use pink and green food dye, and I actually used quite a bit of dye. I think I'm used to making a full recipe of frosting, and I didn't realize how pigmented that much dye would make this frosting, because usually I'm used to making twice as much frosting. And then I also left 1 tub of frosting just plain white. I know a lot of people are kind of iffy about food coloring, and so I decided to leave some without. And then this is what the cookies should look like when they're done. They have a golden brown look to them. They're a tiny bit crispy on the edges, but not too crispy, and then the insides are super soft and cakey. And then comes the fun part, which is just decorating. And then the last thing I'm gonna do is put sprinkles on the cookies. This frosting is not super sticky, and so the sprinkles had a hard time staying on. So eventually I just had to put some in my hand and sprinkle them that way instead of straight out of the bottle. And then that's it. That is how you make these cookies. Enjoy these clips of me posing for the thumbnail. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you try out this recipe, please let me know in the comments below. Send me a picture on Instagram or Twitter. I'd love to see how your cookies turned out. And that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow for another Vlogmas video.